Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I am going to share my review and a bit of a page through of Elfking the Immortal role-playing game from Lucid Eye Publications. This is written by Steve and Joe Sella. Hopefully, I'm close with the pronunciation of that last name. And you can get the 152-page softcover of the revised edition of Elfking the Immortal from Amazon.com for $39. Having said that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the original hardcover edition of Elfking the Immortal. Do want to mention, this is not the edition that you get from Amazon.com. That is the softcover revised edition. Totally different cover artwork, but the revisions are relatively minor. Now, the reason why I mention this is because I am going to be sharing a flip through of this core rulebook, which I got to be honest, I don't think the revised edition is available as of yet in hardcover at Amazon. But the reason why I'm going to look through this book is because it's far, far easier to do a page through of a hardcover book than it is a softcover book. That's the only reason. A couple of things I do want to point out before we jump on in. First of all, the fine folks over at Lucid Eye Publications were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's very important that you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a good feel for what's inside Elfking the Immortal and share my thoughts about the game too. All right, let's jump on in. Now, I am going to address the 800-pound elephant in the room and say that Elfking the Immortal does utilize a good amount of AI-generated artwork. Or it might be AI enhanced or assisted. But to be honest, to me, it looks like it's AI generated. And I know there are a lot of people who feel very, very strongly about AI generated art. And I will talk about that when I get into my final thoughts. So Elfking the Immortal is a fantasy role-playing game. It draws a lot of inspiration from the Michael Moorcock Eternal Champion stories, especially Elric of Melniboné. And I have to say, I have pronounced it Melniboné for decades. So Melniboné does not roll off my tongue very well. But it's not only the Elric stories. I do see some influence from Corum, Hawkmoon, even Jerry Cornelius, because the world of Elfking the Immortal is connected to our world. And that is actually something that is a major point of the Eternal Champion stories, is that we have all these universes that are connected. They're intertwined. And that goes for Elfking the Immortal too. Now, it isn't only Michael Moorcock's stories that I feel that this draws influence from. I also get a bit of a Chronicles of Amber vibe, the Roger Zelazny stories, and even some of the short fantasy fiction of Clark Ashton Smith. So this does have a sword and sorcery angle to it as opposed to high fantasy. So let's talk about mechanics, because this is a dice pool system, and you're going to be using 10-sided dice. So what essentially you're going to be doing as a player and game master is rolling handfuls of D10s, sometimes 10 or more at one time. You're looking to roll a 7 or higher, that's a success. If you roll a 10, that is a critical success. So what happens here is all of your rolls are opposed. So as a player, you're rolling against the game master all the time. Now, there might be a problem with that with some game masters out there, because I know there are some game masters who prefer games that they're not actually rolling against the players, that all the dice rolling is done by the players. That is not the sort of game you're looking at here with Elfking the Immortal. I don't have an issue with it, but I am pointing that out because I know there are some folks out there as game masters, they don't want to feel like they're playing against the players. So we have virtues, and they are kind of traditional fantasy role play attributes, just with different names. So we've got might, finesse, reasoning, willpower or will, as well as essence and elan. So as an example, elan is, for the most part, charisma. So we've got our virtues, which are going to provide dice pools. We also have skills. There aren't a ton of skills, so this is not a game where the game master and players have to memorize lists and lists of skills. We do also have lores. And the way to look at it is skills are abilities, whereas lores is acquired knowledge. And it is recommended when you first start playing and running Elfking the Immortal that your player characters are elves, because they are the main focus of Elfking the Immortal. And yes, as the title may have given away already, they are immortal. Now, they can die in a lot of different ways, but they are immortal. So what happens is your player characters have been around for centuries. So are the NPCs who are elves. So what will happen is you're going to find that your beginning player characters are going to be far more adept and far more powerful than your traditional fantasy role-playing characters are to start. And once again, it's because they've been around for centuries. So to create your character, you're going to roll a handful of 10-sided dice. Now, there are various different options as far as generating your virtues, those attributes. And it's either roll 9 dice and drop the lowest 3, or roll a dozen dice and drop the lowest 6. So your virtues and skills and lores all run the gamut from 1 to 10. That is the pool of dice you will roll when you're looking to succeed at a test that utilizes those virtues. Now we have the skills, and then we have lore. And I did find the lore to be pretty interesting. These are the skills, and you're going to see here, this is how you generate that skill. So perception, you're going to take reasoning and will, you're going to average those. That's going to be that dice pool. That's going to be the score. Persuasion, reasoning, will, and elan. Very, very easy. Same goes with your lores. So once again, skills are abilities, lores are knowledge. So we have a variety of different lores. Lore of the infernal realms, lore of the mortal races, lore of things that grow. So we do have a lot of aspects of the player characters that are going to be far beyond what you would normally expect from beginning fantasy role-playing game characters. But having said that, keep in mind, your players are going to be dealing with a lot of elven NPCs who have also been around for centuries. So they will be far more powerful than you would expect to start off a role-playing game campaign or adventure with beginning characters. When you're rolling those 10-sided dice, easy peasy. Every 7 or higher is a success. Every 10 you roll is a critical success. That goes for the players as well as the game master. So every success that the game master rolls cancels out a success that the player rolled. Now, critical success is handled far differently than you'll see in many role-playing games. Critical successes can only be canceled out by another critical success. So it just counts as a regular success, but it can't be canceled if you happen to not roll a critical success against it. And what'll happen here is whoever's got the most successes achieves what they're attempting to do. Now, as far as game masters, they could be rolling for NPCs, they could be rolling for the environment, but they are always going to roll in tests that the players make. So every roll that players make is contested. Once again, got to mention that because there will be some people out there who may not necessarily be too keen on that idea of always having to roll against the game master and the game master against the players to determine success or failure. Combat is easy as well. In fact, I have to point out, Elfking the Immortal is pretty rules light. I mean, especially once you get that concept of the universal resolution mechanic, right? You got to pull a dice. You can roll those 10-sided dice. You're looking for 7 or higher. And of course, the 10s are critical successes. Combat does add in some additional wrinkles, but for the most part, you're looking at just rules for specific instances. So using two-handed weapons single-handedly, or fire, or vacuum, multiple enemies, and so forth. I will mention that Lucid Eye Publications is known for their miniatures rules and their miniatures, and I do believe Elfking the Immortal is an offshoot from a miniatures game. Off the top of my head, I think it's called the Red Book of the Elfking. I don't know. I haven't actually had an opportunity to take a peek at it. There are Elfking miniatures. I'm going to share a quick peek at some towards the end of this video. There are also multiple adventures that are available for Elfking the Immortal. I will share a couple of those real quick, but those will be featured in a different video. So combat, fairly easy to wrap your head around, although there is a little bit of a miniatures game feel to those mechanics. But once again, we are utilizing that universal resolution mechanic. Now, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting as far as weapons, you don't have weapon skills. So we have might and we have finesse. Might is used for melee weapons, finesse is used for ranged weapons, and each of the weapons will have a minimum virtue score that you'll need to utilize that weapon. Now, if you're using a weapon that is like far below what your virtue is, then you'll actually get bonus dice to roll, which I thought that was kind of cool as well. So in combat, boiling it down to its simplest aspect, if you hit and you have more successes, that's how much lifeblood you're going to score against your opponent. And lifeblood is essentially your hit points. We have magic. We have two different kinds of magic. And there are a good number of spells also in Elfking the Immortal. And the spells are more sword and sorcery kind of spells. They are not the high fantasy spells. But I find it pretty cool. We've got glamours, and we also have rude magic. And we have glamour points, which you're going to spend to cast spells. So there are no spell slots, and every player character has access to magic as well. So we have glamours, which are along the lines of rituals, spells that are going to take some time to cast. And then we have rude magic, which is our combat magic. So you'll have players and NPCs slinging spells at each other, spending their glamour points, and those combat spells are the rude magic. So we, as I mentioned, we get a nice slate of magic spells in here also. There are rules inside Elfking the Immortal. There aren't a ton of them, which will cover player characters who are humans or trolls. Those are also two of the major races on the world of Eos. And once again, we do see that Michael Moorcock influence, especially Elric, whereas the trolls and the humans sort of come from the Young Kingdoms, if you're familiar with the Elric stories. And the elves, the Melniboneans, I guess we would use as an example, look down upon those Young Kingdoms and those who reside in those kingdoms. So I thought that was kind of cool. The trolls and the humans tend to be very bloodthirsty. So if you are actually utilizing humans and trolls as player characters, there is a bloodthirst mechanic, which means that the humans and trolls tend to resort to violence far quicker than the elves would. The elves live for centuries, so they have time to plot their revenge and come up with all these back dealings and things along those lines, whereas humans and trolls, they have far, far shorter lifespans. They don't have time to waste on planning revenge decades down the line. We do get a bit of a bestiary, which will feature various different creatures. Not a ton, but there's a good number. I do like the magic items and treasure that are in Elfking the Immortal because they also have a very sword and sorcery vibe to them. Not looking at the typical +1 broadsword or +2 shield. As far as combat, I should probably mention that as a defender, the defender rolls dice. As I pointed out, pretty much all your rolls are going to be contested as a player, and you'll have defense. So it's based on your armor, shield, things like that. That is what creates the dice pool to roll as a defender. I do want to point that out. We also have rules as far as sentient weapons, a la Stormbringer and Mournblade. So we've got rules for that. And one of the aspects about the elves that I think is very interesting, and this is where we get the character advancement, and that is glare. So what's very, very important to the elves, they are extremely vain. They care about reputation and glory. So we have this currency essentially known as glare. So as your player characters acquire more glare, that means there's more eyes on them and more elves are talking about them and quite possibly are in awe of them. And maybe the player characters are heroes of the people now. So that's what we have as far as character advancement. Now, as the player characters advance, they could gain thralls or companions. And I thought that was kind of cool too, because once again, looking at Elric, Moonglum is a perfect example of a companion. There are some rules regarding domain play. They're not super in depth, just like there's some rules regarding downtime. And we also have a very short introductory adventure. Elfking the Immortal is scene-based, it's encounter-based. We're not looking at a game that's a dungeon delve or a hex crawl by any stretch of the imagination. The adventure is fairly short, does give you a little taste of the game world, not as much as I would have liked. And that's essentially what we find in Elfking, the Immortal role-playing game from Lucid Eye Publications. Without further ado, let's swing on over to the other camera so I can provide some final thoughts as well as my review score. I mentioned this first thing in this review. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to go into a little more detail. There is AI-generated artwork in Elfking the Immortal, or assisted or enhanced, what have you. There is AI artwork in Elfking the Immortal. And I know there are a lot of people out there who refuse to purchase any product that features AI generated, enhanced, what have you, art. And I completely understand, because AI generated art puts artists out of work, and it also steals from published artwork. How do you think the AI generates the art? So there is that. So I completely understand if you wanted to turn off this review as soon as I said there's AI generated artwork. I really get where you're coming from. Flip side of that coin, though, we have a lot of small publishers out there who are producing really cool role-playing games and board games that they don't happen to have budgets for artwork. And let's be very honest, if you're taking a peek at a role-playing game and you don't see color artwork in that book, and that book is not first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons stuff, you're kind of like, there's no art, or it's just, lackluster line-drawn art that isn't very inspirational. You tend to just kind of close that up or quit taking a peek at a preview, and you're like, nah. So there is that. So these small publishers need to have some eye-popping artwork to get your eyes on their product. Otherwise, they can't survive. So I know this is a very, very complex issue with tabletop gaming right now as far as AI-generated artwork. And I can see both sides of the argument crystal clear. So I do want to mention it does have the AI generated artwork. I am not going to reflect that in my review score though, but I can certainly see if that turns you off of even considering purchasing Elfking the Immortal, which to be honest would be too bad because there is a lot to really like in Elfking the Immortal. If you're a fan of the Elric stories and the Eternal Champion stories of Michael Moorcock, and full disclaimer, I'm a huge fan. I have been reading and rereading and listening to audiobooks of the Eternal Champions stories for decades. So I really, really dig the Eternal Champion stories. So keep that in mind. Like I said, that's a little caveat there. But if you like that setting, if you like sword and sorcery, then you really do owe it to yourself to take a peek at Elfking the Immortal. It is rules light. It is a dice pool system. Yes, I know some people don't like chucking huge handfuls of dice. Most gamers do, to be honest. And yes, I know there are game masters out there who don't like to have to roll opposed rolls against their players. That might be an aspect that kind of turns you off of this as well. Not something that really bothers me. I'm used to chucking dice against the players for years and years and years. Although this is a rules light system, when you're reading through the rules portion of the book, it's not all that intuitive and it can be a bit verbose. And I did find myself at times reading, stopping to pause, thinking to myself, I need to reread that again. Rereading it and then saying to myself, oh, okay, now I get it. I see what they mean or what this mechanic is. So there is a little bit of that, but there is a lot of imagination and inspiration that has gone into Elfking the Immortal. I think it is a really, really well done role-playing game. I like the setting. I think the setting is very interesting. It is not a low magic fantasy setting, but it's not a high fantasy setting either. I like the two different kinds of magic. We got the glamours that take time to cast. We also have the rude magic, which is our combat magic. Combat should be concluded rather quickly, and the player characters and NPCs and such are relatively squishy, so combat is pretty lethal. I always appreciate that in games. So there is a lot to really dig about Elfking the Immortal. I also have to point out that this role-playing game is being well supported by Lucid Eye Publications. In fact, as I mentioned before, I will share a video where I cover the adventures, but I think there are 4 published adventures right now, and I also think there are a couple of supplements out there for Elfking the Immortal. So this is not a core book, one and done, and that's the end of it. So I will have coverage of the 2 adventures that I have in my possession. And as I had mentioned, Lucid Eye Publications makes miniatures games. And to my knowledge, Elfking the Immortal is an offshoot of a miniatures game. And when I take a look at the adventures and share my review of them, I'm going to put it together in one video. I'm going to actually share a look at these miniatures that I've got as well. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too when you're taking a look at a small publisher role-playing game. How well supported is this game? Is it just a core book and then I have to throw together my own homebrew adventures, which I know some people love, other people not so keen on. So I do want to mention that this is very well supported to this point. So very cool. On a scale of 0 to 10, I give Elfking the Immortal a very solid recommendation. I give it an 8 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, The Gaming Gang Dispatch airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you will not find here on the YouTube channel. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for taking time out to watch this review. And until I see you next time, here's hoping all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.